Salutations and welcome to Space Time Continues. I'm Mary Louise Davey. Let's get going to space.
T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Lift off of Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is through the tower.
Falcon 9 currently has gone supersonic.
So, Trump is apparently pushing Earth's climate over the brink. That's according to Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking delivered a keynote speech as he received the honorary freedom of the city from the City of London at a ceremony at Guildhall in the City of London. So, world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, you know, the one who's famous for black holes, well, he feels that the current U.S. president has made bad decisions regarding the Paris Climate Change Accord and runs the risk of leading mankind to the tipping point. He fears it may end up with, and I quote, turning the Earth into Venus. He went on, "We are close to the tipping point where global warming becomes irreversible." He continued, speaking to the BBC, Trump's action could push Earth over the brink to become like Venus with a temperature of 250 degrees and raining sulfuric acid. He also suggested that Trump's decision would not only cause unavoidable harm to Earth, but also endanger the natural world for us and our children. I think one kind of expects the other. 97% of scientists fear that this cataclysmic ending due to climate change, and they're silenced. And then who speaks for us? The 3% who are climate change deniers. Of course, I'm not weeping for myself because I likely won't be alive when it gets this drastic. Of course, there's a couple of articles this week that claimed that global warming was in some places doubling its speed, and in others of the areas of the world such as Eastern Tropical, Pacific Ocean, Southern Ocean, which are colder relative to much of the rest of the world, it takes longer to warm them, and so they're a little bit behind on it. Now, I am weeping for our future, and if we don't leave the planet, I mean by leaving the planet, if we don't take Elon Musk's plan or Stephen Hawking and Yuri Milner's plan, then last week's show, which suggested several doomsday scenarios, that doesn't even paint the picture. The true face of climate change will follow, but maybe I should review exactly what climate change is. Now, to make sure we're on the same page, allow me to give you a basic definition of climate change. When someone refers to climate, they're usually referring to the average weather in a place. Now, it may include patterns of temperature, precipitation, rain, snow, humidity, wind, seasons, stuff like that. Quite obviously, climate patterns play a fundamental role in shaping natural ecosystems and the human economies and the cultures that depend upon them. But when the climate we've come to expect is no longer what it used to be, then that's where the change comes in. Our climate is rapidly changing with disruptive impact, and that change is progressing faster in the last 2,000 years. According to the report, preparing for a climate change, rising levels of carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere that have warmed the Earth are causing wide-ranging impacts such as rising sea levels, melting snow, ice, extreme heat events, fires, drought, more extreme storms, rainfall, floods. Scientists project that these trends will continue, in some cases accelerate, posing significant risks to human health, our forests, agriculture, fresh water supplies, coastlines, and other natural resources that are vital to Washington State's economy, environment, our quality of life. So it's more than climate, because there's so many systems that are tied to climate. A change in climate effects that can extend to everywhere from how people, plants, and animals live, things like food production, amount, quality of water, health risks, contagions. Change when the rains come, what the temperature is can alter when plants bloom, ripen, when insects hatch, when streams are at their fullest. And this could go global and historically synchronized pollination of crops, food for migrating birds, spawning of water supplies for drinking, irrigation, forest health, and more. Some short-term climate variations normal, but longer-term trends now indicate a changing climate. Our state and societies around the globe need to reduce human-caused greenhouse gas emissions to avoid worsening climate impacts and reduce the risk of creating changes beyond our ability to respond and adapt. This is being addressed, and Washington State, for instance, has adopted policies to hopefully change this and build a healthier economy. Now, Etna, the black hole mission, is one of my books, and yeah, it's sci-fi. Now, sci-fi is the greatest predictor of what we're actually going to have happen, isn't it? Well, in my book in particular, it has a couple of paragraphs I'd like to read to you that pertain to today's topic of climate change. And when I wrote this years and years ago, it was kind of a hypothesis, but pushing it to the extreme. And now I look at it and I'm wondering, was it extreme enough? So let's see. The curtain was about to close on Earth, and the lucky lottery winners would soon be making way to one of the 3 ships via shuttles. The Earth had been going through growing pains that increased with each decade, in part nature's response to the unilateral taking of its resources, and in part from the giving back of unwanted pollutants. Now, in 2265, each person was required to wear oxygen masks and protective outer clothing. There were just so many individual things wrong now that it was hard to point to just one and try to fix it. From the climate shifts that had Northern America facing a mini ice age and Europe becoming a desert, to the magnetic pole reversals and the greenhouse gases and intensive atmospheric changes, all had made the Earth the harsh environment they now knew. When the ESA had been formed, its first problem to tackle in the early 2200s had been the attempt at reoxygenating the oceans. In oceans, oxygen normally got dissolved from the atmosphere, but the atmosphere could no longer support that need. The water life started dying out, slowly at first, then worldwide. The solution, they had thought, would be a large filtration plant to try and manage the situation in a small area first. Cuba and its coral reef area were selected for the trial, but it failed. The oceans died a slow death. The whales were among the last of the sea life to die out. From there came the disease, coupled with the crop failures and subsequent famine. When solar storms became frequent, travel was inhibited and communications were challenging. The Earth might have millions of years left, but mankind did not. It was out of this necessity that the plan was developed and the new technologies were perfected. So, hopefully you see it as the warning that it should be. Etna, black hole mission, really didn't mean it to be a real prediction. Really meant it just to be a sci-fi book, but I'm thinking it's an actual prediction. We've got to take care of it. A wonderful thing is happening. Growing groups of cities and states and companies, businesses are making a commitment to meet the United States Paris climate commitments. Without President Trump having pulled out, States, cities, and businesses might not be filling the vacuum that he's left behind. They're making their own voices be heard and their own commitments, and they're going to reduce greenhouse gases, and the numbers are mounting. More than 1,000 companies and institutions, including more than a dozen Fortune 500 businesses, signed on to a statement, "We are still in," saying they're committed to meeting Paris targets. The statement calls Trump's decision a grave mistake that endangers the American public and hurts America's economic security and diplomatic reputation. The coalition's numbers had climbed way past 1,400. More than 200 cities had committed to the Paris Accord through various coalitions. The ironic thing, Trump and the members of his administration have said that they favor shifting power to the states. They want to shift power to states. And the states, they want to take over where Trump is failing us. So this might not be quite what they had in mind. Initially, 3 states, California, New York, and Washington, had launched the United States Climate Alliance. Quickly, the total number of governors in the alliance had swelled to 13, including Puerto Rico, and more likely to join as time goes on. 2 of the states in the alliance, Massachusetts and Vermont, are headed by Republican governors. You see, everyone has to breathe. Republican, Democrat, Independent, young, old. The alliance's members, who represent more than a third of the country's gross domestic product, and together make up the 3rd largest economy behind the U.S. and China, say they will commit to the U.S. goal under the Paris Agreement to reduce emissions 26 to 28% from 2005 levels by 2025. As the federal government turns its back on the environment, New York and the states across the country are picking up the mantle of climate leadership and showing the world it's possible to address climate change while also creating good-paying careers. And that was said by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. So facts. And everybody wants facts on climate change. Everybody wants facts from scientists, period, right? Well, evidence of cause and effect, it's obvious. I mean, there are very vital, very emergent situations coming up. How do we know about climate change? How do we know what's going on? How do we know what we're going to get to? The graph I'm showing you is based on the comparison of atmospheric samples contained in ice cores, and more recent direct measurements provides evidence of how much atmospheric CO2 has increased since the Industrial Revolution. The Earth's climate has changed throughout history, sure. Many climate deniers say just that. I mean, that the climate has been changing throughout history, and well, you know, it ebbs and flows, you know, hey, but it's not that bad. Well, you see, only in the last 650,000 years has there been 7 cycles of glacier advance and retreat, with the abrupt end of the last ice age about 7,000 years ago, marking the beginning of the modern climate era and of human civilization. Most of these climate changes are attributed to the very small variations in the Earth's orbit that change the amount of solar energy our planet receives. Okay, but should you wish to look at the scientific evidence for warming of the climate system is unequivocal. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has plenty to say regarding it. The current warming trend is significant not just because of its upward turn, but of the likelihood, said to be greater than 95% probability, to be in the result of human activity since the mid-20th century and growing rapidly at a rate that's unprecedented over decades to millennia. Scientists are able to look at the big picture in ways never before, and then analyze that data, of course. also never before. They have orbiting satellites, other technological advances, which permit them to study the climate on a global scale. This body of data, collected over many years, reveals the signals of a changing climate. The heat-trapping characteristics of carbon dioxide and other gases was demonstrated in the mid-19th century. Their ability to affect the transfer of infrared energy through the atmosphere, the scientific basis of many instruments flown by NASA today, well, there's no question that increased levels of greenhouse gases must cause the Earth to warm in response. Ice cores drawn from Greenland, Antarctica, the tropical mountain glaciers show that Earth's climate responds to changes in greenhouse gas levels. Ancient evidence can also be found in tree rings, ocean sediments, coral reefs, layers of sedimentary rocks. These ancient and paleoclimate evidence reveals that climate warming is occurring roughly 10 times faster than the average rate of ice age recovery warming. The evidence for rapid climate change is compelling. So let's look at some of them specifically, such as sea level rise. The global sea level rise has been impacted severely and has risen about 8 inches just in the last century. More alarming is the rate for the last 2 decades, which is nearly double that of the last century. See, this is the image of the Republic of the Maldives. It's vulnerable to sea level rise. But what about global temperature rise? Well, do you think Mercury's hot? We may be headed there. 1 degree at a time. The average surface temperature of the Earth has risen approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 1.1 degrees Celsius, since the late 19th century, a change that was driven largely by increased carbon dioxide and other man-made emissions into the atmosphere. Most of the warming occurred in the past 35 years, with 16 of the 17 warmest years on record occurring since 2001. Not only was 2016 the warmest year on record, but 8 of the 12 months that make up the year from January through September, with the exception of June, were the warmest on record for those respective months. That's not good. And not just the land masses are warming up, we're warming the oceans. Oceans take on a lot of the planet's surface temperature. It's mostly the top 700 meters, about 2,300 feet of ocean that feels the greatest. How much has it changed since 1969? Approximately 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we have shrinking ice sheets. The Greenland and Antarctica ice sheets have decreased in mass. To remind you of what mass is in science, mass is the amount of matter which an object has. Newton's second law says that mass is the property of matter that determines the force required to impart a given acceleration to an object. So data from NASA's gravity recovery and climate experiment show Greenland's lost 150 to 250 cubic kilometers, that's 36 to 60 cubic miles of ice per year between 2002 and 2006. Now, while Antarctica lost about 152 cubic kilometers, that's 36 cubic miles, of ice between 2002 and 2005. So does this not sound devastating? That was a long time ago. It's going worse and worse and worse as time goes on. So declining Arctic sea ice. Arctic ice doesn't get a bye. Both the extent and thickness of Arctic sea ice has rapidly declined over the last few decades. These are 2012 Arctic sea ice minimums and lowest on record, rather. Glacial retreat. Glaciers are retreating pretty much everywhere around the world, from the Alps to the Himalayas, Andes, the Rockies, Alaska, Africa, So this is the disappearing snow cap of Mount Kilimanjaro as seen from space. So extreme events. You know how the U.S. loves to set records, right? Well, maybe not this sort of record. Record high temperature events in America have been on the rise, and record low temperature events have been basically disappearing altogether. That's since 1950. The U.S. has also witnessed increasing number of intense rainfall events, hurricanes, storms, flash floods, the whole bit. And ocean acidification. Do you remember back when we had the Industrial Revolution? Yeah, me neither. Well, the ocean does. Its acidity has increased by nearly 30%. This increase is a result of humans emitting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and hence more being absorbed into the oceans. The amount of carbon dioxide absorbed by the upper layer of the ocean is increasing by about 2 billion tons per year. That can't be good. But what about snow cover? Well, satellites have observed that the amount of spring snow cover in the northern hemisphere has gone down over the past 50 years, with the snow there melting much earlier. So if it melts earlier and then the warming is having, this trend that's going on is affecting how things are. The way they have always been, not necessarily the way they're going to be in the future. Scientific consensus, what kind of consensus are we talking about? 50%? 60%? 70%? No. 97% of climate scientists agree that climate warming trends over the past century are very likely due to human activities. And most of the leading scientific organizations worldwide have issued public statements endorsing this position. But the 3% apparently are the loudest, and the squeaky wheel, as you know, gets the oil. So, is there a climate time machine we could take? Maybe travel through Earth's recent climate history to see how increasing carbon dioxide, global temperature, and sea ice have changed it over time? Perhaps. Eyes on the Earth. We can track the Earth's vital signs from space and fly along with NASA's Earth-observing satellites in an interactive 3D visualization. There's a global ice viewer. Earth's ice cover is shrinking. So, we can see how climate change has affected glaciers, has affected sea ice and continental ice sheets. So, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do? There are so many images of change. There's a stunning gallery of before and after images of the Earth from land and space that reveal our home planet in a state of flux. The Earth is dying. Or at least the Earth is trying to shake us off. So, now on to a more pleasant topic. Actually, a topic that's necessary to get to where we should be. No, we're not on the moon, we're not on Mars, or some other alien landscape. This is Italy's Mount Etna. And this is the proving ground for many rovers. It's a terrain that looks much like it came out of a science fiction book, maybe out of here. Basically, they're tested in ways that are not possible anywhere else. This test bed of future rovers and robots on Mount Etna allows these vehicles of approximately 3 feet in height, a simple four-wheeled machine, to move ahead in their future mission to experience the moon and the same sorts of challenges that they would experience if they were on an alien landscape. Shown are scientists, German scientists in this particular case, German Aerospace Center, that controls one of the robots on Mount Etna. The program has enlisted experts from other countries, including Britain, US, Italy. The aim of the research is to improve the quality of equipment for future missions. The test is to duplicate conditions that are expected to be encountered on these future alien landscapes, these interplanetary missions where robots will be used to transport materials. And Scientists from German Aerospace Center are able to read the test data generated by the robot and have it relayed through in real time. That won't necessarily be the case when they're in space. Then they have a network of equipment, including rover robots and drones, that will be mounted to monitor seismic activity that also closely simulates what would be used on the moon or Mars. A rover seen on Mount Etna with 4 wheels mounted on the corners and twin cameras that basically are eyes. There's a reason why we see future societies in science fiction movies using rovers. Sending robots and rovers will be cheaper and safer than sending humans to other worlds. Even if we go to Mars and we want to find out Titan and we find out, go someplace further and further, maybe Alpha Centauri, we're going to be sending these robots. So apparently we're not going to take care of climate change. So apparently we need to make sure we perfect these robots at, say, Mount Etna in Italy, and then we can go out into the world and go out of the world, out of this world, and then out into space. Now, last week I told you I'd meet with a rocket society. I'm in talks with them at this time, so it wasn't obviously this week as expected, but I will keep you up on what's going on. I'm hoping it'll be in August, about the second week. In the meantime, I hope you release less carbon emissions. Make sure you talk to your political representatives. Make sure you push science agenda, because science is what is going on. Policy should be based on science, not based on, well, I didn't like that president and anything he did we're going to reverse. But let's be happier, and let's know that next week on Space Time Continues, I'm going to be covering a much happier topic, a much cooler topic. I'm going to be covering the topic of looking at different space technologies for propulsion, and for spaceships in general, and that's always such a cool topic. So join me next time on Space Time Continues. Thank you.